This was the biggest man-made explosion in history until Hiroshima, and almost everything you've heard about it is the easy part of the story. There's a village that vanished that morning and was never rebuilt, a neighborhood the rescue trains rolled straight past, and a 100-year tradition that's actually a 1970s marketing stunt. December 6, 1917, the French cargo ship Mont Blanc, loaded with nearly 3,000 tons of high explosives, collided with the Norwegian ship Emo in Halifax Harbour's Narrows. A fire broke out on deck. 20 minutes later, at 9:04 a.m., the Mont Blanc detonated, the largest human-made explosion the world had ever seen, a title it would hold for the next 28 years until Hiroshima. Almost 2,000 people were killed. Roughly 9,000 were injured. That much, most people already know. Here's what usually gets left out. Directly across the Narrows from the blast sat Turtle Grove, known in Mi'kmaq as Kepakek, a shoreline community where Mi'kmaq families had lived for generations, making a living from woodworking, basketry, and the harbor itself. The explosion didn't just level buildings. It threw a wall of harbor water nearly 60 feet high onto the opposite shore. Turtle Grove took that wave almost directly. Homes were crushed or swept out to sea. Survivors were pulled from the wreckage. Many weren't. The settlement was never rebuilt. A community that had lived on that shoreline for generations was erased in a single morning, and for decades, it barely appeared in the story at all. You may have heard that Halifax sends Boston a Christmas tree every single year, without fail, as thanks for the doctors and relief trains that raced north after the disaster, an unbroken tradition running over a century. Here's the twist. That's not quite true. A tree was sent in 1918, and then nothing for over 50 years. The tradition wasn't continuous at all. It was revived in 1971, largely as a marketing effort by Christmas tree growers in Nova Scotia. The heartwarming annual gift people picture today is really only about half a century old, dressed up as something much older. And the story of those famous relief trains from Boston has its own missing chapter. They ran straight along the rail line into Halifax, directly past Africville, a black community on the city's north end that had also been devastated by the blast. By multiple historical accounts, those trains didn't stop there. And when the Halifax Relief Commission later distributed aid, researchers who examined the case files found a clear pattern. Black families were, on average, granted a smaller share of what they claimed than white families were, for the same kinds of losses, from the same disaster. It's a detail almost entirely absent from the traditional retelling, a disaster that was supposed to have leveled the city equally, followed by a recovery that didn't. One more thread almost never makes it into the story. A young Anglican curate named Samuel Prince was in Halifax that morning, helping the dying. He later enrolled at Columbia University and wrote his doctoral dissertation on what he'd witnessed. That 1920 dissertation, Catastrophe and Social Change, is widely considered the first systematic scientific study of a disaster ever written. In effect, the field of disaster sociology, the discipline researchers still use today to study earthquakes, floods, and pandemics, traces its roots to one curate's account of a single morning in Halifax. The explosion also blinded or seriously injured the eyes of nearly 600 people, a toll so severe it directly led to the founding of the Canadian National Institute for the Blind in 1918. This isn't just a 100-year-old story either. In 2024, shipyard workers in Halifax uncovered massive, twisted steel fragments buried in the harbor floor, pieces believed to be part of the Mont Blanc itself, one weighing over 1,000 kilograms. More than a century later, the harbor is still giving up pieces of that morning. The explosion reshaped building codes, disaster science, and a city's skyline. But the fuller story, the vanished village, the trains that passed some neighborhoods by, the tradition that isn't what it claims to be, is the part most people never hear.